Abel Hollis had barely finished begging for honest work when Gwelda Ellison kicked his bedroll off the porch. "Sleep in the mule barn," she said, while 7-year-old Matty tightened both arms around his neck. Before Abel could swallow the insult, Isabella Abbott stepped into the yard, opened one hand toward him, and said, "You will not sleep with the mules. You are going to marry me and work this ranch beside me." Then Abel saw the interlocking diamond cut into the gatepost behind her, the cattle syndicate's mark. The same mark that had closed every respectable bunkhouse door from Wichita to Abilene. His free hand moved toward the inside pocket of his coat before he caught himself. A silver watch rested there, its inner case stamped with the same diamond. He had carried it for years, without once calling it an inheritance. The yard went still. Horses shifted behind the fence, and chickens scratched near the woodpile, as though no one's future hung in the dust. Isabella looked near 30, in a plain work dress and a linen apron dusted with flour. She did not look amused by her own proposal. There was strain around her eyes, but her hand remained steady, palm up and empty. She did not reach for Matty. She did not crowd him. She left the distance between them for Abel to cross or refuse. Gwelda stood above them in dark broadcloth. She had come to inspect the ranch her money had kept alive after Isabella's husband died, and she watched Abel as if she knew the price of his bones. "Hollis," she said. "I have heard that name before." Abel shifted Matty higher. He had no wagon, little money, and food for perhaps 2 days. She was his sister's child, and the promise he had made over a fever bed was the one promise he would not break. If he refused Isabella, they would be back on the road before dark. If he accepted, because he was hungry, he might put Matty under the roof of the very people who had blacklisted him. He did not take the offered hand. "Do you need a husband, ma'am?" he asked. "Or a man to blame when this place fails?" Isabella lowered her hand. She did not blush or plead. The particular silence of someone accustomed to being doubted settled over her shoulders. "I need an answer by sundown," she said. "Until then, the summer kitchen room is clean, and the child may eat at my table, whether you agree or not." She turned toward the barn. Gwelda's mouth tightened as Isabella passed her. Abel remained in the yard with Matty clinging to him and the diamond brand staring from the gatepost. They did not leave. Abel needed the shelter too badly, but he would not sleep under Isabella's roof while a marriage bargain hung over it. That night he spread his bedroll on the hard earth beside the mule barn. Matty slept in the small room off the summer kitchen, with the door propped open, and Abel's old neckerchief tied around her wrist so she would know he had not gone far. Before dawn he was already in the pens. He had pushed longhorns north for years and knew when a steer would turn before its shoulder moved. By sunrise, he had sorted a mixed bunch into clean groups, while Gwelda's foreman Vance watched from the fence as if competence were defiance. Abel worked without asking who owned which horse or which gate stuck in damp weather. Work was the one language no rich man had ever managed to take from him. When the breakfast bell rang, he accepted a plate and sat on an overturned crate away from the long table. Matty perched beside him, solemn and hungry. Isabella crossed the yard with a small ledger under one arm. She checked the feed bins, ran her fingers over a split trough hinge, and called each hand by name. She listened when an older rider explained why a mare had gone lame. The men answered her politely. Their faces changed when her back turned. They thought she was soft. They thought the ranch was bleeding out. Abel could read that kind of doubt, because he had worn it himself. Matty followed Isabella from a careful distance, wooden horse in hand. Isabella never demanded a smile. She simply slowed so the child could keep up. Abel broke his biscuit and handed the larger half to the child. When he looked toward the porch, Isabella was watching them. Something in her expression eased, then disappeared behind the ledger. A ripping sound came from the barn. Her spotted goat stood with one corner of Abel's bedroll in its mouth, chewing with grave concentration. Abel rose so quickly his tin cup tipped over. The goat tugged again and tore loose a long strip of canvas. Mattie stared. Then her face opened into the first missing tooth grin Abel had seen since they left Texas. "She kept the deposit," Mattie announced. Two hands laughed into their coffee. Abel looked at the ruined bedroll, then at the child's smile. He rubbed the back of his neck and decided murder would be excessive. On the porch, Isabella lowered her face to the ledger. Her shoulders moved once. That hidden laugh troubled Abel. He had not expected to want to hear it again. By afternoon, the ranch had found its ordinary noise: hammers, tack buckles, cattle calling from the lower pasture. Abel was repairing a bridle near the office when Vance's voice cut through the open window. "It is the feed advance, Mrs. Abbott. Mrs. Ellison said the men pay it back through their wages." "They did not request an advance," Isabella replied. "And this charge for gear is false. They brought their own." Abel moved closer. Vance stood over her desk, one thick finger planted on the ledger. An older hand named Otis waited in the corner with his hat crushed between both hands. The figures on the page had erased nearly his entire month's pay through feed gear and bunk fees that had never been agreed upon. "You want money for the autumn drive?" Vance said. "You keep the books the way Mrs. Ellison expects. Beggars do not ask for fare." Heat rose through Abel. He knew the trick. Advance a man his own wages, charge him for breathing, then call his labor repayment. He reached for the office door. Then he stopped. If he dragged Vance into the yard, Otis might get his pay, but Isabella would lose something harder to recover. Every hand watching would learn that her word required Abel's fists behind it. He stepped into the doorway instead and filled it. "Do you want the roan saddled, Mrs. Abbott?" he asked. "Or is there work in here you mean to handle first?" "You do not speak unless Vance turned." "I asked the owner." Abel kept his eyes on Isabella. She looked from him to Otis, then stood. She closed the ledger under Vance's hand with a crack that made him snatch his fingers back. "Otis receives his full month," she said. "No man on this ranch pays for gear he owns or food he was promised. From this day, every entry comes through me. Refuse, and you may pack your saddlebags." Vance's face darkened. He shoved past Abel hard enough to brush shoulders. "Mrs. Ellison will hear of it." "I expect she will," Isabella said. After Otis left with his pay, Isabella carried the ledger into the empty dining room. Abel followed, but stayed near the doorway, hat in hand. "Gwelda advanced money after my husband died," she said. "The note comes due after the autumn sale. She has been cutting wages, frightening buyers, and telling the hands I cannot keep the herd together. She wants the cattle sold cheaply enough that I miss the payment. Then she takes the land." Abel glanced toward the yard, where Vance was already whispering to two riders. "A husband does not erase a debt," he said. "No." Isabella met his gaze without flinching. "But a public betrothal to a cattleman the crew respects may stop them from walking before the sale. It may stop buyers from treating me like a widow who can be cornered. I need one season in which Gwelda cannot divide everyone around me." "And after the season?" "If the sale pays the note, the ranch remains mine. If it does not, a wedding ring will not save it." At least she was not selling him a miracle. "I need a man Gwelda cannot buy," she continued. "You need steady wages and a place for Mattie." I am not asking you to rescue me. I am asking whether you can stand beside me without standing in front of me." Abel looked down at the floorboards. He thought of Mattie, coughing through wet nights on the trail. He thought of the clean little room, the open door, and Isabella slowing her steps so a frightened child could follow. "I will agree to a public betrothal until the sale," he said. "I run the sorting and earn a written wage. I keep my own room. I will not take a husband's rights from a bargain neither of us has chosen in full. And when the note is paid, you may end it without owing me another thing." Isabella considered him for a long moment. "Agreed." She offered her hand again. This time Abel took it. Her grip was work-roughened, not delicate. That unsettled him too. The ranch learned of the betrothal before supper. Mattie slept through the news beneath the kitchen table. 3 days later, Abel and Isabella collided at the well after dark. He had taken the night watch, repaired a broken fence, and unloaded feed until his shoulders burned. Isabella returned from the calving pens with mud to her knees and a lantern swinging from one hand. "You do not need to take every watch," she said. "Vance's men sleep against the posts." Abel hauled the bucket over the stone lip. "I do not. You will wear yourself down before the sale." "I know how to work." He set the bucket down harder than necessary. "It is the only thing I brought worth offering." Isabella rested the lantern on the stones. "That is not true." He looked at her. "You think this ranch will keep you only while your back holds?" she said. "You cannot earn belonging by turning yourself into another mule, Abel." The use of his given name struck deeper than the rebuke. For one foolish instant, he wanted to ask what else she believed he had brought. The question rose to his throat and stopped there. Men who asked such things had to be prepared for the answer. The kitchen door opened before either spoke again. Mattie appeared in an oversized nightgown, her hair standing wild around her face. "Are you fighting about buying cows?" she asked. "Mr. Vance says we are too poor to buy cows." Abel let out a breath that nearly became a laugh. "We already have cows," Isabella said. "Then he is not very good at money." "No," Abel said, "he is not." Isabella reached into her apron pocket and held out a wrapped sugar drop to Abel. He stared at it. "For the exhausted ranch mule," she said. He gave the sweet to Mattie, lifted her with one arm, and carried her inside. As he passed Isabella, he caught the faintest curve at the corner of her mouth. That night, Abel listened to Isabella bank the stove and check the latch. He had trained himself not to care who moved beyond a wall. Now he knew the sound of her boots and the pause before she blew out a lamp. It felt dangerously like wanting. The next morning, Isabella stood near the calving pens, looking up at the broken emergency bell rope. Vance had refused to mend it for months, claiming brass wire cost too much. Abel waited until she rode to town. Then he found a strip of saddle leather, a brass ring from a ruined harness, and stout baling wire. He climbed the post and rebuilt the pole. He lowered the handle so Isabella could reach it while holding a calf or working in mud. He did not leave a note. A man could still do one useful thing without turning it into a claim. At dusk, Isabella tested the rope. The bell's clean ring crossed the yard. Abel stepped from the barn shadows, but stopped at the gate. Isabella looked at the leather loop, then across at him. She did not thank him in front of everyone. She understood somehow that praise could feel like payment, and payment could turn kindness into debt. "Teach the hands the signal," she called. He nodded. The next morning, Mattie stood on a feed barrel while Abel explained the polls. "1 means come to the pens," he said. 2 means wait for instruction. 3 means help is needed. Mattie raised her wooden horse. 1 means come here. 2 means ask first. 3 means help her. That is what I said. You used more words. The hands laughed. even Otis. Isabella stood by the office with her arms folded, and Abel found himself storing away the sound of her laughter as carefully as he once counted cartridges before a trail crossing. The ranch began to move differently. Men came when Isabella called. They brought questions to her instead of Vance. Abel backed her orders in the pens without repeating them louder, and after a few days the crew stopped looking to him for permission. He should have been satisfied. Instead, he noticed when Isabella missed breakfast and left coffee by her ledger. When their fingers touched over a feed tally, Abel pulled back too quickly and spent the next hour angry at an innocent steer. Then a rider brought a letter bearing the syndicate's diamond seal. The mark matched the engraving hidden inside Abel's watch. What surprised him was not that Gwelda knew. It was how exactly she had guessed the price of tempting him back beneath it. Gwelda offered Abel the trail boss position on a large herd moving north. The wage was more than most men earned in a year. It would buy Matty schooling, a small parcel of land, and enough certainty that he would never again have to beg at a porch. It would also take him away before Isabella's sale. He read the letter twice and laid it beneath the lamp in the barn office. Some part of him wanted Isabella to see it. Another part hated him for that weakness. She came in after supper with the next day's tally sheets and found it before he had decided which part would win. When Abel entered carrying a bridle, she was standing beside the desk. "Will you take it?" she asked. Her voice held no accusation. That made the question worse. "It is enough to get Matty out of the dust." "Yes." Isabella set the letter down. "It is also from the woman trying to break this ranch. I know who sent it." "Do you know why?" "To remove me from your pens, and to prove you can still be bought by the promise of not needing anyone." Abel threw the bridle over the stall door. "A roof and a school are not shameful things to want for a child." "I did not say they were." Isabella stepped nearer, though she kept the desk between them. "But you use the word drifter like armor. You keep one foot turned toward the road, so no one can say they left you first." His jaw tightened. "You use widow the same way he said. You make it sound like a whole life instead of one grief. You remember every hand's name. You walk the pens at 2 in the morning. You make room for Matty and pretend the shelf was empty by accident. Yet you would rather bargain for a husband than ask a man to stay because you want him." The barn went silent, except for a mare chewing hay. Abel had spoken too much. He expected Isabella to send him out. Instead, she pulled the wooden chair from the desk and left it open beside her. "The sale has been moved forward," she said. 4 days from now. Gwelda has been warning buyers that the herd is poorly sorted and the crew may quit. She will be there to see whether we break." Abel looked at the empty chair. Sitting would mean more than discussing cattle. It would mean admitting he had somewhere he wanted to remain. He sat. "I will not leave before the sale," he said. Isabella's hand tightened once around the tally sheet. "And after?" The truthful answer frightened him. "After, I will not leave unless you ask me to." It was not forever. It was the nearest thing to forever Abel had ever dared to say. The breaking point came 2 days later. Gwelda rode into the yard in a hired buggy, with Vance beside her on a heavy bay. They went straight to the sorting pens where Abel was working, and Matty sat on the top fence rail. "I have not received your answer," Gwelda called. "The trail herd leaves tomorrow. The position remains yours if you admit this ranch is failing under a woman's hand." Abel wiped his brow with one glove. "I already have work." "You have a widow's promise, and a child who needs better than pride." Vance nudged his horse close to the fence. The bay crowded Matty's boots against the rail. "You are a fool, Hollis," he said, "tying yourself to a sinking spread for that nameless little burden." Abel moved before thought caught him. He vaulted the lower rail, seized the bit, and jerked the horse's head away from Matty. With his other hand, he caught Vance by the coat and dragged him halfway from the saddle. Years of swallowed humiliation rose at once. He wanted Vance in the dirt. He wanted one blow to answer a decade. "Abel." Matty's voice was thin with terror. He looked up. She had flattened herself against the post, not afraid of Vance now, afraid of him. The anger went cold. Abel opened his hand and let Vance fall back into the saddle. He stepped away from the horse, breathing hard, ashamed of how much effort it took. Isabella crossed the yard at a run. She did not ask Abel to finish what he had started. She went straight to Vance. "Get off my land," she said. Vance, once uncertainly. "You are dismissed. Return, and I will send for the town marshal." Gwelda's face sharpened. "Then I withdraw the feed advance for the second drive. Without it, you will sell short, miss my note, and lose this place." "Then I will lose it honestly," Isabella said. "I will not keep it by letting you turn my people against one another." Gwelda wheeled the buggy toward the road. Vance followed, one hand pressed to his collar. Abel could not look at Matty. He walked to the mule barn and shut himself in the dark. He had refused Gwelda's money, then nearly become the violent drifter every rumor claimed. Worse, he had frightened the child he had promised to protect. No one came to coax him out. After nightfall, he found a tray outside the door, untouched by any note. Coffee, bread, a bowl of stew for Matty, who had refused to eat in the kitchen without him. Beneath the cup lay the next morning's sorting sheet. The porch lantern burned until dawn. Abel entered the summer kitchen before sunrise. Matty sat at the table in her nightgown, turning her wooden horse between both hands. Isabella stood by the stove, but gave them the room without announcing that she had done so. Abel knelt in front of the child. "I am sorry I frightened you." Matty studied him. "Were you going to hit Mr. Vance?" "I wanted to. Would it have helped?" "No." She considered that, with the severe attention children gave to adult failures. "You can be angry," she said. "Just do not get the face that forgets me." The words struck clean through him. "I will remember." Matty put one small hand against his cheek, then pushed the sugar bowl toward him, as if the matter required practical repair. On the porch, Isabella waited with coffee. Abel stepped outside. "How do you want to run the sorting?" She looked at him for a moment, taking in the question, and everything it cost him. "Groups of 10, she said. "I will take the gate. I need you on the left flank, where they break." He nodded. When the cattle began moving, Isabella called each cut. Abel did not take over when the herd pressed hard. He moved his horse where her command needed weight, and left her voice at the center of the yard. By mid-morning, she turned toward the bell rope. Before she reached it, a red hen hopped onto the lower rail, pecked at the brass ring, and pulled. Clang, 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 clang. Men came running from the far barn with shovels and ropes. They found Matty scolding the hen. 3 means help, she told it. 4 means you are wasting everybody's time. The yard broke into laughter. Abel looked across the dust at Isabella. Her smile met his without caution. For one unguarded moment, he forgot to protect himself from the sight of it. After the work was done, Isabella called Matty to the tally board. A narrow shelf had been fixed beneath it, just high enough for the wooden horse. "This place is yours during the day," Isabella said. "You may use it or leave it empty. No one else will put anything there." Matty set the horse down, took it back, then set it down again. Abel watched from the doorway. Men with money used to call me family when they needed my hands, he said quietly. They forgot my name when wages came due. That is why I do not trust an open door. Isabella turned toward him. I do not need the name they refused you. I need to know where you will stand when tomorrow becomes difficult. Left flank, Mattie said, still arranging the horse. Isabella's mouth twitched. Abel answered without smiling. Left flank. The morning of the sale arrived under a pale sky and a hanging cloud of dust. Buyers, drovers, and neighboring ranchers crowded the Abbott pens. Gwelda stood near the auction platform, dressed as if she had come to a funeral she expected to enjoy. Isabella did not hide in the office. She stood at the main gate with the tally board in hand. One bell pull brought the crew. 2 held them for instruction. 3 brought help when a steer broke the line. The signals Abel had mended now carried Isabella's orders from pen to pen. The herd came through calm and evenly grouped. Otis and the others worked with the pride of men whose wages had not been stolen, and buyers began bidding against one another. Abel stayed on the left flank. Once a brindled steer broke toward the crowd. He turned it with his horse before panic spread, then looked back to Isabella for the next cut. He could have claimed the yard with a louder voice. He found he wanted something else more, to see the men obey hers. By late afternoon, the last contract was spoken and witnessed. The sale brought enough to clear Guidelda's note, pay every hand, and purchase winter feed. There would be no second drive, but there would be a ranch in spring. Gwelda approached while buyers still stood nearby. I see your hired man saved your herd, she said. Will you keep him as a charity case now that the danger has passed? The yard quieted. Isabella set down the tally board. She crossed the open space toward Abel, who stood beside Mattie near the fence. The betrothal began as a way to hold this ranch together, she said, loud enough for the hands and buyers to hear. The note is paid. The ranch no longer needs the bargain. Abel felt the old road open beneath those words. He could take Gwelda's position, buy land, and never again wonder whether anyone had chosen him or merely his labor. Isabella stopped before him and held out her hand. It was the same open palm she had offered on the first day. This time, there was no debt behind it, and no deadline in front of it. I am asking you to stay because I want you here, she said. Her voice trembled once and steadied. I want Mattie at my table. I want your boots by my door, and your temper where I can argue with it. I want you beside me when there is nothing left to save. Abel looked at her hand. For years he had believed safety meant giving no one the chance to dismiss him. Isabella was risking refusal before the whole yard and leaving his choice untouched. He set Mattie on her feet between them. Then he took Isabella's hand. I want the mornings, he said. I want to hear that bell, even when a chicken rings it. I want the left flank and the long winters. I want to stay when the work is done. Isabella's fingers tightened around his. Then stay. Inside the mudroom, heavy iron hooks lined the wall. Isabella removed her work gloves and hung them on the second hook. Abel placed his worn gloves over hers, the 2 pairs settling together. Mattie pushed between them and looked up. I am going to need my own hook. Abel glanced at Isabella. Tomorrow, he asked. Isabella leaned into his side. Before breakfast. Mattie hurried toward the kitchen to make certain they did not forget. Abel rested one hand at the small of his wife's back. The work ahead of them was real winter feed, broken fence, stubborn cattle, and a child who believed every promise required carpentry. For once, none of it was the price of staying. Together they walked into their home. I will. Mattie looked from one to the other. Does this mean I still get the shelf?
It means Isabella said you may demand a second one. The laughter that moved through the yard did not humiliate Abel. For the first time,
Being seen felt nothing like being owned. 3 weeks later, on the morning of the wedding, Abel stood in Isabella's office wearing a dark suit that pinched beneath the arms. The house smelled of coffee, clean linen, and the prairie flowers Mattie had gathered before breakfast. Abel removed the silver watch he had nearly touched on his first day at the gate and placed it on the desk. "Open it," he said. Isabella pressed the catch. Inside the case was the interlocking diamond she had seen on Guelda's seal and on her own gatepost. "My father founded the syndicate," Abel said. "He gave me this when he wanted my silence, not his name. Later, I fought the board over false debts and cut wages. They blacklisted Hollis because it was the only name that belonged to me." Isabella looked at the watch, then at him. Guelda knew. She knew enough. The trail boss offer was not kindness. She wanted me away from you and back under the diamond. "Why did you not tell me?" "Because men have been ashamed to hire me and eager to use me. I did not know which would be worse in your eyes." Isabella closed the watch. She did not hide it in a drawer or throw it away. She placed it back in Abel's palm and folded his fingers over it. "I know the man who carries it," she said. "He is not the man who stamped that mark. Your name is what you have done with it." Abel had prepared for pity or disgust. He had not prepared for her to return the choice again. After the ceremony, he decided Mattie would keep the watch until she was old enough to understand that an inheritance could be refused. They married outside the mule barn doors where Abel had once slept, rather than owe a promise he did not mean. The ranch hands stood as witnesses. Otis held Abel's hat. Mattie carried dried prairie flowers with her wooden horse tucked into her apron pocket. When the preacher finished, Isabella kissed Abel once, brief and certain. The hands cheered. Abel, who had faced stampedes with less alarm, nearly forgot where to put his hands until Isabella caught one and laughed against his shoulder. Before they walked to the house, Abel stopped at the gatepost. He took a rasp from his coat pocket and set it against the carved diamond. Isabella stood beside him. "You do not have to erase where you came from." "I am not." He began working the iron teeth across the wood. "I am removing Guelda's claim from where we live." The mark faded beneath his hand. When only rough timber remained, he gave the rasp to Isabella. She smoothed the last sharp edge herself. Then they crossed the yard together.